Thank you so much, Mandalee, and welcome everybody. This is the second of our webinars on the CAEP fact sheets. This one is entitled Using and Updated the CAEP fact sheets as part of the 3-year planning and continuous improvement process. So, today we're really going to be focusing on a quick review for those of you who have joined us for the first session. And then we're going to go into sort of a deeper dive exploration together using a Miro board activity. Some of you may be familiar with Miro board, but don't worry. If not, we'll run over how to use it. We, of course, as Mandalee says, welcome any questions as we go along, and we are seeking to invite an open and whole group engagement for the activity. So feel free to really just talk to us, come off of mute. Now, although some of you know us already, let's do some quick introductions. We're here today from West Ed, and we have the pleasure of providing technical assistance and support for the adult education field through our work with CAEP. I'm Lisa Lefevre. I am a senior program associate at West Ed. I have been working with CAEP for the last year, and I'm here with my colleague, Greg. Greg, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Hi, all. Greg Hill Jr. I'm a senior research associate at WestEd, and just really glad to be here.
Great. And we have others on our team too that you'll be meeting throughout the year, throughout our support. We're very blessed to have a good group on board. We also have a good group here. We have, as always, the Counselor's Office CAEP team, Myra Diaz, Cora Rainey. We've also got Sanjay here today. I can see you, Sanjay, there. We've got the CDE team, Dr. Carolyn Zachary, Diana Batista, Neil Kelly. They all support this type of work, and they always are working to ensure quality adult education. I want to take a moment and let them say hello. Sanjay, Neil, anybody else? Cora?
Good morning.
Good morning.
As they used to say in the old days, just the facts, man.
Sounds good. Thank you all. And of course, as always, we've got our SCOE TAP team. They're always helping to support and organize our sessions so that they work beautifully. Thank you very much, Mandalee and Holly. So now I would like to just quickly, there's a big good morning to Neil there, by the way. I'd like to quickly review our agenda and then our goals. So for our agenda, we are really, again, going to go over the CAEP 3-year planning process and continuous improvement. Many of you are familiar with it, some aren't. We are going to then go into a deeper dive of using the CAEP fact sheets to inform adult ed programming and planning. This follows from our first session where we reviewed different tabs. This time we're going to go through an activity, and then we'll open to any further discussions and questions. The goals for today are really threefold. It's to increase understanding of the updated CAEP fact sheets and their use. We'll talk about what those updates are. They're really data updates, which Greg will quickly run through. Then to provide you all with an opportunity to engage and workshop with the CAEP fact sheets. And last but not least, really to share our learning, our experiences, and to network together, because we are a mighty force when we're all here. Now, we're going to be moving to the next slide where we're going to just do a quick poll. This is the same poll from the first session, and we realize some of you might be here, so you might change your answers because you might be pros now, and we have some new people. So Greg, I'm going to ask you to launch the poll. We have 3 questions.
Sorry, I'm trying to get it moving here.
No problem. And the 3 questions are whether you're new to the CAEP to the CAEP 3-year planning process, what's your comfort level with data, using data, and then what's your experience using the CAEP fact sheets. So after the first session, some of you probably are going to bump that last one up. No leading here.
All right. I feel like I see a lot of familiar faces here.
I think.
I feel we might have wanted to see who was here and who wasn't. But either way, this would be a good experience for even, I think, for even those of you who were here. All right, so we got about a 66%, 70% response rate. That's good. Let's see if we can't get it a little higher. We can.
And Greg can see this on the back end. I know we can't, but
You will soon. 74. See if we can get to 80%. 3 simple questions. Oh, there we go. 82. That's great. Good, good. We'll give it a sec and see if 84. Excellent. Just a couple more seconds here. Oh, that's interesting.
I see some people smiling.
All right. So we're at 84%, and I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. I think that's a pretty good response. All right. Can everybody see it? Ah, such an excellent question already. So it looks like many of you are, a slight majority, right, are not new to this process, but nevertheless, there's still a bunch of you who are. We see about a quarter of you feeling very comfortable, about 56% somewhat comfortable. So that's actually pretty good, right? I mean, if we're, so, 70, 80% or so are feeling okay about how to do this. But then, there are still about 20% who are like not feeling that great. And you could also cut it the other way and have somewhat comfortable included in those other ones as well. Experience, got a lot of, most folks just sort of have used them occasionally. Some are familiar with them, about a quarter. And then roughly 20% don't know anything about them at all. And so got a nice sort of mix here. All right. We already have a question in the chat. Do we want to go ahead and address that now, Lisa, or do we want to hold?
Sure, Greg, we can go ahead and address that question, and then I'll cover a little bit about the 3-year planning process.
Excellent. Okay, so Jason asks, and I hope you're having a lovely morning as well, is if there's a change log for the fact sheets. Yes, good point. Sort of internally there is. We haven't, because for the most part, the data points have remained the same. But what you pointed out here, Jason, I think is important, and specifically the age range, right? And so what Jason is noting is that in prior years, actually, I think it was last year, maybe just last year, age included, the fact sheets included 16 and 17-year-olds.
Right.
There are valid reasons for doing this, but after looking at it a little more carefully, what we kind of resolved to do, we kind of felt like the risk of inflating the number of high school diploma students or prospective high school diploma students, adult learners, was a little bit too high. And so basically we removed 16 and 17-year-olds and just went with 18 and above, just, because, something like 98 or 99% of those who are under 18 are enrolled in high school, right? And would therefore not really be eligible for CAEP. Full stop. And so we don't want to inflate that need. But that's a really great point, Jason. Probably sort of moving forward, we can be more granular, especially if there is a desire to look across years, right? To be able to say that. We mentioned it, I think, in the last webinar, and I feel like it's in the PowerPoint, but that's a great point. Harpreet asks, is there a way to download data in addition to the image PDF PowerPoint? There is. Currently, that feature is not turned on. We can ask about it. I can ask about it. Yeah, let me look into it. I know it's possible. in my experience, the data export from Tableau is because it's really showing you the back end. It's not as clean as I think. It's not like when you export from Launchboard where it's actually, pretty clean and, makes sense. It's not that it doesn't, but let me see what we can do. I mean, at the other thing, Harpreet and everybody, is we are holding kind of office hour type, I forget exactly what we're calling it, but that.
Support sessions.
Yeah, exactly. And so if there are specific data points or, you just want to chat with us a little bit about what you're trying to do, you can also just reach out in the meantime. And I mean, we certainly have the data. It's not very difficult to produce. And so long as it's not like a deluge of, asks, then I think we should be fine. But either way, like we are here to help. And so let me look into it. We'll look into it.
Great. No, sounds great. And we are going to cover more as we go through the session today and take more questions. Right now, I'd like to just quickly run over the 3-year planning process so that we can kind of align what we're doing with the fact sheets. So the CAEP's 3-year planning process really, as many of you know, really provides consortia and partners with an opportunity to do 3 things. Assess services provided, so offerings, impact, alignment with regional needs, then to identify adult education successes and needs, which is all part of that. And then from there to pinpoint and define strategies to meet needs for a 3-year period, the next 3-year period. The process is meant to be collaborative. It's inclusive also, so you can include your partners. You're to really looking to involve a multiple perspective approach as a way to identify these assets. So you're looking at your adult schools, your providers, your community-based organizations, and really great to get student voices if you can, so that you're understanding your adult learners' needs and then thus able to really plan those supports. The upcoming CAEP 3-year planning process will focus on the 2025-2028 3-year plan. That plan is also informed, or vice versa, you can say vice versa. The annual plans are kind of informing that 3-year plan too. So that's a sort of mutual marriage that you want to watch as you're doing that. So your 3-year plan does not stand alone. It really comes with those annual plans too. And then finally, there is guidance that has recently been released, which also provides the procedures to complete and submit a consortium's 3-year plan. We will put that link to the guidance. I'm sure many of you have gotten it already, but it is there on screen and we can chat it too. Next slide, please. Thank you. So now the CAEP 3-year planning process also encourages consortia not only to identify needs, but to do it kind of systematically in a way that really becomes beneficial for the whole sort of programming. And you can do this through conducting a needs assessment. This means focusing on adult learners' educational needs regionally, and then thinking about responsive services. Ways to do this include assessing current levels and types of education workforce services, identifying gaps, and then strategizing assets available to leverage innovations or opportunities that already exist. As such, the planning process also provides an opportunity to think about or identify areas of continuous improvement for programming and also for partnership building, and to think about ways that you can support student outcomes. We will be giving through, I think it's later on this week, on the 21st and the 23rd, we will be going through a community engaged asset mapping process that also fits within the needs assessment sort of approach. But of course, we are focusing today on how consulting data sources can really be part of this process. And here we're going to be covering the CAEP fact sheets. So, Greg, I'm going to be turning it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. Again, for those of you who were on the webinar last week, this is you've heard this before, but for those of you who are not, so let's go ahead and explain. Well, what are the CAEP fact sheets, right? The CAEP fact sheets are in its current form sort of an interactive tool. So we built it on Tableau, so we can make the data that would be most germane to your planning efforts available in a way that allows you to, that is both curated as well as filterable by a few different key population characteristics. This in their current form, they also allow you to compare community demographics with student characteristics. We leverage Launchboard data, which admittedly is a little bit old, but it's what we have to be able to show side by side views of transitions, which is, of course, one of the key metrics and one of the most important, I think, metrics for ensuring social and economic mobility, as well as, labor market data and some student profiles. The fact sheets actually go all the way back to AB 86 planning, and many of the data points are the data points that were used to create the initial estimates for funding. As Neil unquestionably remembers very well. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so this doesn't entirely address Jason's comment, but what we can say, what we have here, right, is just sort of a brief description of what's changed. And so what we really did is just sort of updated the fact sheets with the most current public use microdata sample data that are available, which is the 5-year ACS 5-year PUMs through 2022. As I think Jason pointed out last time, there is a more recent vintage that is coming out, or at least is scheduled for, I think, December, but I'm pretty sure that's the 1 year. 5 year usually takes a little bit longer. And, between us chickens, I have lost some faith in the US Census ability to remain on target with their deadlines for release of new vintages. But perhaps I'm biased because of, or not biased, but perhaps that's because of delays that were caused by COVID, but nevertheless. But as it stands, we're not planning to update the data when that happens, but nevertheless, you shouldn't be seeing dramatic changes within a single year, right? Yeah, I mean, and frankly, if that were to happen, you would already know, right? In addition, we updated labor market data. So we have the latest data from Lightcast for the period covering 2020 to 2023. Of course, all of those data points in Lightcast, or at least the majority, are actually drawn from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, as well as local area unemployment. The current fact sheets also feature the MIT living wage for each region for a single adult, no children. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the MIT living wage, I would encourage you to just Google it. There are living wage estimates for hourly wages for different family structures. So, there are living wage, median living wage are for families with, say 2 working adults, 1 child, et cetera, et cetera. And so, again, I would encourage you to sort of check those out and consider them and with in your specific context. I would also add that, and sort of the population trying to serve, I would also add that MIT is not the only source of information or the only folks who estimate living wage. And so I think the University of Washington is another good one. And so that could also be another area for you to look at. And finally, with regard to living wage, absolutely living wage is important, but as I mentioned last time, there are programs that serve a really important social good, and that may not necessarily, exceed that living wage. But nevertheless, I think it's important to also consider the sort of programs that can have impact, or rather, programs that can have an impact on your community, in addition to those that can produce living wage jobs. And then lastly, we also did update the Adult Ed Transitions tab, with 2021, 2022, and 2020, 2021 data. And so that's for transitions and enrollment, respectively. It's, again, a little bit old, but it's what we have so far. And as many of you have pointed out previously, these are still spanning, more or less COVID years. And so, the fact sheets are just one input to your planning process. And so if the numbers look wonky or they don't feel right to you, then I would encourage you to draw on the robust reports that, for example, TOPS Pro provides, or for those of you who work at colleges, leveraging your research and planning folks at the college to get data that's going to be most helpful for your purposes. Okay, let's see here. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, thank you for updating this link. So Lisa just put the link in chat. I'm going to go ahead and, beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up and then share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that okay? Awesome, okay. Let's make a slight adjustment here. So I'm reluctant to go too deep into sort of the overview here, just because many of you are familiar, but the short version is there are tabs along the top that show you different views on the data that we're providing. So population demographics is the landing page. This is where you'll show up where you'll go when you plug in the URL. The population adult ed comparison tab shows comparisons between the demographic data that you saw in the previous tab and launch board data for 21-22. Likewise, we show a comparison of the transitions data points around transition to post-secondary and CTE, and then transition to non-developmental college credit course, labor market information, and then student stories. This is also just sort of tells you what has changed, which we've just gone over. All of the tabs provide options for drop-down filtering for your consortium. One thing I would make sure that you do is, as you go in to use these, and I've done this, where I'll start to do something and say, hey, those numbers don't look right, and then realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm on the wrong consortium, or I left it at statewide. And so you want to be just attending to that. And if you sit for too long, it'll want to refresh. And so just double check as you're using it. One of the things I like to do is actually download some of the views just right off the bat to PDF, so I have them for comparison. Unless you have a photographic memory, it can be sometimes difficult to keep in mind what has changed when you use some of the filtering options. I'm actually waiting for somebody in the chat to say, I do, and then we'll all be really mad at that person for their having that wonderful memory. But okay, so as lastly, there on the population demographics tab, you have the ability to filter by certain characteristics. Some of the more common ones are listed up here. As you click on them, the charts below will change. I think that is the only one where that is true. The rest all utilize the drop-down options. Okay, any questions about basic functionality that I can help to address quickly? Okay. Excellent. Okay, in that case, what I'm going to do is sort of transition us to an interactive kind of activity thing. So bear with me just 1 second.
Greg, do you want me to give everyone that Miro board link?
In 1 second, yes. I'm just making a quick adjustment so that it shows up on screen the way I want. Perfect. Okay, so yeah, if you want to go ahead and put that link in the chat, and then what I will do is quickly share that. Okay, can everybody see this okay? All right. So if you're unfamiliar with Miro, that's fine. Lisa and I will try to capture information as you share it. If you're not feeling comfortable utilizing the tool, or it's really just an interactive, it's just a whiteboard, a lot like Jamboard, but people can get sort of lost in it because it has this eternal scroll thing. And so try to control for that. And worst case scenario, just keep your eyes on what's happening on the screen share, and you'll remain centered on what we're talking about. So our goal here today is, like I said, talk a little bit about using CAEP fact sheets to inform adult ed programming. As I mentioned before, this is just one input. And so for everything that we talk about here, it's really important to keep in mind that this should not be your sole source of truth. You live in your communities, and really, I think it's incumbent upon you to engage with your communities around what needs are, and really to validate or add greater nuance to what some of the demographic data are saying, right? I mean, demographic information, census data is very broad, right? And they capture characteristics of individuals. That's true, but in groups. And there's always variation the more granular you get. Okay. So when I think about planning for CAEP, what I try to do is I sort of identify or lay out, right, what the demographic indicators might be for regional need, right, for the specific programs that CAEP has been established to support, right? I've sort of condensed them here on this slide just to ABEASC, ESL, citizenship, CTE, et cetera. To be sure, there's also the Child School Success Program, and there are lots of different potential indicators for that. And I do just want to emphasize that, as well as adults with disabilities, I've also noted that one of the demographic indicators for adult basic ed can often be adults with disabilities, but not exclusively. Before I forget about the Child School Success, and also for adults with disabilities, just because they're not listed doesn't mean they're not important. And in fact, I've actually seen some of the most innovative programs in those two program areas. But these are just a little bit easier to understand. And so thinking about ABEASC, right, adult basic ed, adult secondary ed, right, we would leverage demographic indicators like no high school, those without a high school diploma, educational attainment, where it's, actually that is the same thing. Adults with disabilities, ESL citizenship, right? We might look at foreign born, limited English, which, by the way, in the fact sheets means individuals who speak English less than well. And that is something for you to keep in mind, and I'll explain why when we go back and start looking at the fact sheets. Because it'll, for all of you who do provide ESL, and specifically, know WEO really well, those who speak English less than well versus less than very well. right, would align differently to the different ESL levels, right? And so CTE workforce prep, right? I mean, there are lots of potential indicators, but obviously the most obvious are going to be unemployed, those near poverty or less, and educational attainment. I think this is one of the demographic indicators that are, I think, most useful for CTE, really are best utilized in conjunction with, the labor market data, and specifically the labor market data that is filtered for entry education level for entry. And I'll explain more about that. Are there other demographic indicators that folks use or other than the ones that I've noted here, to help identify some of the populations and needs? Oh, snap. Are people not seeing my screen?
I just locked it momentarily. I don't know if anybody else can see it.
No. Can I just get a thumbs up from somebody who's like, yeah, I see it. Molly, you're on my screen. So like, okay, beautiful.
Neil sees it. Okay, it's just fine.
All right, cool. Oh, Lisa's throwing me here. No, I'm kidding. All right. So, all right. So what other kinds of demographic indicators did folks use, or have they used in the past? Thank you, Maya. You can go ahead and come off mute. And I will call on you.
We can see it, Greg.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Diana, are you there?
Yes.
So how does this jive for you in your experience? Does this sort of accurately reflect some of the demographic indicators that you use? Have you used others that haven't been captured here?
No, I think this is, more or less what's typically being used. So I'm a little stumped, but what's going on with the age? Is it 65 plus?
Oh, you're talking about the on the demographic.
Are you on statewide?
Why that? Why 65 plus? Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's actually really important for thinking about that target population. And so I want to pin that and see if we can't talk a little bit about the implications of that and where that can be useful and where it's probably not. So, okay, I'm going to go to just the next slide here, or the next frame. Okay, so we're looking here at, and let's see if I can't really, you should be able to, okay, never mind. So for all of you who've been able to navigate here effectively, if you scroll over to the left side of your board, really, you should see the option to put in a sticky note. And so you just pick it and put it there. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, that's totally fine. Just come off mute. But let's go ahead and engage in this sort of really briefly, right? So I went ahead and chose the Capital Adult Ed Consortium. Last time I picked LA, so this time we're going north. Capital, anybody, actually, is there anybody here from Capital? From Carrick?
See, Carla's here.
Say again? Welcome.
Carla,
Okay.
are you here?
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
Hello.
There is a cruel part of me that wants to put you on the spot.
Oh,
but I'm not
no.
going to do that. No, it would never, not.
No, I had my Wheaties this morning, so I think I'm good.
Yeah, so, but hopefully this is still helpful, right? There is a question from Denise, but right, what do the demographic data tell us? So is the category in the CAEP fact sheets English language ability self-reported or based on assessments? Okay, excellent question. And while I'm addressing that, I'd say feel free to put in chat or on sticky notes some of what the demographic data seem to be saying to you. So English language ability in the US Census is a little bit, well, I don't actually think it's complicated. So it's really difficult to be, ooh, I think I just lost screen share.
No, that's okay. Mandalie's taking it over, Greg, to
Oh.
do that. Is that okay? All
Yeah, that's fine by me.
right.
Yeah. Let me- All right. So it's good that you can actually see it though. Okay. So English language ability. So what that really means is this. So the U.S. Census asks a couple questions, and one of the questions has to do with what languages do you speak at home, right? And then based on those who say they speak, whether it's like English only or other languages, there are questions that drill down into English language ability. And so that's why if you're looking at the English language ability pie chart here, you have English only, basically what that means is that these are households, people who live in households where, or actually, yeah, where they speak English exclusively. Now, don't get me wrong, there are, it's important not to conflate like English language learner with populations who have the potential need for English as a second language education, right? And the reason I say this is, so a colleague of mine, speaks English absolutely fluently, has absolutely no accent whatsoever, but there's no scenario where she doesn't consider herself an English language learner. It's an important part of her identity, and so, but does she have the need for English as a second language education? Not really. And so that's actually a little bit why this is utilized as a proxy, right? Because we say, with your first language, what is your first language, et cetera, that right, it doesn't tell us anything about whether individuals in households have limited English ability. And so anyway, does that answer your question, Denise? I hope so. Awesome, good. And it is important to attend to these nuances because you want to be able to say truthfully, right, what you're seeing. And so we've got a couple of comments here. Does 65 plus appear to be dominant because the other age groups are in segments of 4 years? The answer is unquestionably yes. That is absolutely true. Yeah, also the axis here doesn't go to 100. It's just going slightly beyond the highest number. And so if it were closer to 100, it might look a little bit different. But that is what I would say to that. Is not in labor force same as invisible workforce, i.e. coming out of prison? Oh, excellent question. I'm not 100% sure. So I actually don't think that ACS regional data includes data about, well, actually, no, let me back up. I know that ACS does collect data about individuals who are in sort of living quarters, right? And so it's like group homes and presumably prisons, but I'll have to check. It can, incorporating prison populations into regional census data can be complicated, right? Because if you are in a, just because you're in prison in one location, when you get out, that doesn't mean you're going to stay there, right? And so in a lot of ways, they're not considered, right, as a part of the regional population, at least when it comes to basic demographics. Now, the prisons do serve a really, may actually be a major employer. And so that's, I think, where it comes into play. Yeah, typically, thank you, Marianne, for that. Exactly. Typically, in the labor force just means they're trying to get jobs. Not in the labor force means that they're just either not, right? if you look at job skills, my primary employer, you're not considered, there you go. Thank you, excellent, thank you, Marian. The big one, of course, to look at is unemployed. 4% for capital. I'm not 100% sure. I think that's a slightly higher than state, but let me just double check. Hold on. Actually, no, it's on par with state. So, okay. Let's see, what else do we have here? I'll just get group age. Have an idea of who we might target. Yes, exactly. So, oh wow, Marianne's killing it, man. Thank you. Noticing, yes, proportions of individuals who need high school diplomas. And so if we sort of look up here, it's in the gray, but you can see right about 148,000 in Capital Region don't have a high school diploma. And we're going to actually use that as one of our use cases here moving forward in just a sec. And then lastly, for marketing purposes, is there a way to identify ages below high school population? Can whoever put that in there, can you come off mute and just sort of explain a little bit more about your question? I'm not sure.
Hey, Greg, it's Molly.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about the different segments of ages and where people might be most likely to be receptive to the information that something is available to them. Would the age of the person make a difference on how that information is conveyed? Things like that.
Yes,
find that out.
Yes, yes, I love how your mind works. That is absolutely true. And so, just that actually brings us right to the next slide. And so, using your question there, Molly, right, this is what we've done here for this one is filtered by that no high school diploma. And I guess, what are we seeing here in terms of using Molly's question? What are we saying about age distribution? And you can come off mute if it's helpful. That's easier.
Well, this is Molly again.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking, what age is a high school diploma going to be most valuable to? If I am not a high school diploma earner and I am over 50,
Mhm.
is that going to be economically a driver for me? Maybe. I don't know. Where do those kinds of things fall? There's not, like, to me, an obvious big age number there. Maybe the 30 to 39s if you put those together, but that's just kind of what I'm.
That's an excellent question. And I think, so one, it really, I think, is going to depend on how you measure value, right? And so you're absolutely right. Well, getting the high school diploma, and I see you, Kathy, and so thank you, just give me one more. I think getting a high school diploma, ooh. Thank you. Okay, Jason, thank you for qualifying that. I should have known that offhand, but I didn't know offhand, so I didn't want to hazard it. But anyway, so determining value, right? So there may be less economic value for, say, individuals over the age of, 45 or something, but not necessarily, right? It depends on the industries that are around. And really, I think that's where that labor market tab comes in handy. So if you're looking, it actually provides the option to filter for those, with a high school diploma, those without a high school diploma. And that might provide some insight into the kinds of jobs that older adults, right, might benefit, where older adults might transition into, and would need high school diplomas to be able to do that. But there is also another value, right, in that, I think, as many of you who run adult schools, I think, would say, if you go to an adult school graduation, right, it's really quite something. And there are a lot of older adults who get their high school diplomas, and it is really meaningful to them and their families. And it really helps to inspire. So it has another value. But either way, it's kind of a both and one thing I might also add is that population 45, 55, 65 is actually facing very real risk of not having enough money to retire. And so I think there is a sort of a common idea that if we focus programs on those who are like, under 30 and then between 30 and maybe 44, that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. And that is true in terms of like the period where you have the most, where we're likely to have the highest wages. But that's obviously, given the nature of, how we do things, like people have to work much longer than that. And actually, I realized something here. Myra, could you go to the next one? If you're just scroll over there. There you go. So I realize I've been talking about that and nobody's looking at it. So let's see here. We're running short on time, but I do want to address. So Jason, thank you. Rick says, one thing that helps me contextualize age status, hover over the bars. That's exactly right. Ends are really important. Social driver for earning high school. Yep, that's absolutely true. Kathy, you had raised your hand, and so I want to return to that. What
Thanks. You have covered everything, but I was going to talk about this slide that you're showing. When you look at the no high school diploma one, then you can really start to look at what age ranges and what are the ethnicities, and get into who do you really want to target, or who do you want to go after, and for what reason.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You've already answered all of that.
Oh, good. I'm glad. And actually, and I think probably one of the most useful, I think that's actually one of the most useful aspects of these things. But in terms of, so we talked a little bit about age, right? But we can also, and we don't have much time, so I'm going to have to go through this really quickly. But some of the other things that you might look at are, so when we disaggregate by that, but okay, well, what proportion speak English less than well? What proportion speak English less than very well, which should be the combination of English well and less than well, right? Less than very well, sorry. And so if we're looking at capital right now, if I take less than well and well, that gives me 43%, right? So 43% of those without a high school diploma in the capital region don't have the English proficiency that would allow them to excel academically. And so that tells you something, right, about opportunities for both outreach as well as structuring your programs to be able to meet the needs of those individuals, right? If you take that into consideration with the languages spoken at home, right, roughly, 32% of those who have less than a high school diploma speak Spanish at home, and then there's 3% Vietnamese, et cetera. And so that also helps you sort of narrow further, like, okay, this is a segment that we might wish to have some targeted outreach to. Joe Morgan Kim asks, is there additional data, and I'm laughing at Sherry's question, is there additional data on specific reasons why people are not in the labor force? It does, yeah, U.S. Census data does include some information about that, but it's, there are lots of reasons, right? It's kind of, you kind of get at it by and large through correlations, right? So yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, it is true. It's like you can identify adults with disabilities, things like that, but it's it's harder to get at, but it's something I can kind of look into. Not in the labor force often really means, yeah, like what Jason was saying, they are at either retired or it is true that given how difficult it is to sort of get a job in, depending where you are, that there are people who have who will sort of give up on it, and they would certainly be considered not in the labor force. But generally speaking, these are folks who are simply not seeking jobs. And that is where I think engaging locally can help too, right? And say, well, what are the reasons in your area that folks are out of the labor force? Is it just skewing older, right? Is it, and some of your consortium do skew older. Like I was looking at that the other day, and it's, some of them, I think median age was like 32, 33, which is about median age for everybody enrolled. Others are in their 40s, mid 40s. And so, so that's going to be very different. But I want to try to, let's scroll to the next one, Myra. Okay. I think all I want to really say here, because I want to get to the slide with the table, so we also have this tab that shows comparisons with adult ed pipeline data. And so what I've done here on this slide is filtered it by participants. You could absolutely use, reportable individuals. I specifically chose participants so that because the next filter that I use is participants in ASC rather. And so why don't we do this, Myra, if you want to just skip to Mandaline, my bad, to the one that says supply and demand indicators side by side. Yeah, keep going. There you go, that table. All right, so one of the things I like to do, because again, I don't have the greatest memory, right? And remembering all of these data points can be really challenging, is I like to sort of make a little table, right? That says, okay, what am I really interested in? When I look at the data and, what's standing out for me in terms of, different populations or whatnot, that might, based on my understanding of a community, right, might indicate potential area of need or gap, right? And so in this case, I've just chosen gender, race, ethnicity, English proficiency, and employment, and I've narrowed it down mostly for the purposes of fitting on a slide some of the subgroups that I've identified. To be sure, some subgroups are going to be more prominent in some consortia than others. And just because it's a small number doesn't mean that it's not important to sort of serve those populations. Will the board stay open? Yeah, I think that's great. I absolutely can leave that open. And so, but anyway, just sort of quickly, what I like to do is put them sort of side by side. And so, okay, if we're looking at the overall population compared to participants, right? And so there are a lot more women enrolled in adult ed programs in Capital, right, than there are represented in the community. And so this is what you would call overrepresentation. Is that a problem? No. And there are myriad reasons for this, right? If the vast majority are, sometimes this will follow along well, never mind. Anyway, conversely, right, men are underrepresented, right? And again, there can be lots of reasons for this. Some of them can be sociological, cultural, or whatnot. Likewise, what I like to do is sort of compare participants, right, high school in ASE to those without a high school diploma. One thing, and I had a caution about this before, when you try to compare those data points, it's really important that you're choosing the right population. So you want to be comparing apples to apples. if we were to compare participants in adult secondary ed with the overall population, that doesn't work because you know, the overall population, well, there are lots of reasons for it, but okay, sorry. Let's see here, Mandela, you want to scroll to the right? I just want to move, okay. I'm not going to address this because we have 4 minutes, but what I will say is this is an opportunity, this tab actually provides you an opportunity to look at comparative performance. And so a couple methods that I like to use are in the equity index, but that's about proportionality, but the 80% rule. So what groups are actually transitioning, you know, in the highest rates, what groups have the lowest rates, who falls in between, and then sort of asking, okay, do some of these groups achieve the outcome at, you know, 80% or so of the highest performing group? And if the answer is no to that, then that might be an equity gap. And then scroll over. Man, all right. So I've already talked a little bit about this, but what I think is key here is just as you're utilizing this tab, really take a look at that typical entry-level education. And of course, make sure that you're choosing the right counties. Some of your consortium regions span multiple counties. And so skip and skip. Okay, I think we have to stop there. Otherwise, we're not gonna, be able to have any kind of closeout. And so, Lisa, do you want to pick it up?
Yeah, absolutely. And I already see that Holly has posted about our upcoming event. So we really want to thank you all for coming today. We will leave the Miro board up if that's useful to you. We got a few requests to do so. So feel free to look at it, play around with it. Please email us if you have any questions. Holly also put a link in there for an evaluation form. We refer back to these, we use them. It helps us plan our activities. So please fill that out and do not be shy. Contact us. We will be giving some support if you want it in the next few weeks. Also throughout the year, we are doing support too, as we have in the past. So don't be shy. I will answer you as soon as I can, as will Greg. And again, I want to pass it to SCOE TAP. Many thanks for everything.
Thank you so much, Lisa and Greg. We always appreciate you taking your time and going through all of these tools so everyone is better informed. Like she said, Holly has dropped the evaluation link in the chat box. So please take a moment to fill out that evaluation. It not only informs how we plan professional development, but as well as our presenters and how they facilitate to always provide the best experience for everyone. We do have some upcoming events, as Lisa mentioned, so you can always go to our events page and you can look at our registration form there. We really appreciate you starting your week with us this Monday morning, almost afternoon. And I think with that, we're going to go ahead and say thank you again, and we will see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.